Welcome back to Public Affairs on Peach. I'm Rebecca Schramm, and we are talking about Marsy's Law this morning. It's a push to get states to adopt a crime victims' Bill of Rights. There's an effort to do so here in the state of Georgia. And my guest for this segment is Tisha Tallman. She is a former prosecutor and former judge in DeKalb County. Judge, I want to ask you this. What got you involved in this effort?
Well, sure. In another capacity, I was asked to be involved in another position. But this is something that was unbeknownst to Ann Casas, the director, that I was a former prosecutor, and I had quite a bit of experience in this area, and it's something I believe strongly in. So I stayed on in that capacity.
So, supporters of Marsy's Law like you like to point out that our state is 20 years behind some other states like South Carolina.
South Carolina in 1998 passed a constitutional amendment providing rights to victims. So in that sense, yes, we are behind. We are one of the few states left in the country that doesn't acknowledge equal rights for victims with the defendant.
And as a prosecutor, how did that weigh heavily on you? What did you see on a day-to-day basis? And perhaps as a judge, what did you see that made you think, wow, something's got to change here?
Well, there are two issues that come up with the fact that we don't have a constitutional amendment protecting victims' rights. And the first issue is an issue of just recognizing that victims have rights and have a voice in the system. And while the state has acknowledged that there are rights, there's been no enforcement mechanism, no way of holding individuals accountable for when those rights aren't able to be exercised. And then the other component is the fact that we have district attorneys who are elected officials, and everyone that works for them are a product of the fact that they were voted by the people. So Marsy's Law is just a way of acknowledging, yes, there are rights for victims, and yes, there needs to be some accountability with our elected officials in exercising those rights.
So let me ask you this, because some of your, say, former colleagues, the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, they've taken a position against Marsy's Law in Georgia. They're basically saying, that they haven't really seen a case where a victim needed constitutional rights because those rights are already in place. Now, we tried to get them to come on our show and never heard back from them. What do you say to that argument that people already have these constitutional rights?
Well, I know that there are quite a few victims that I've spoken with, and especially in getting involved with Marsy's Law, who haven't had their voices heard. So there is a defect in the way we approach things now. So the natural solution is, if something is not working and continues to not work, then we need to change something. So changing, allowing an equal playing field for victims, giving them those rights and giving them the ability to have someone accountable for their rights would be a huge first step.
Because it sounds like it really is sort of a county by county, case by case basis that we're talking about. Some counties are really good at informing victims, families, what's going on with the case, and other counties drop the ball all the time.
Well, and it's a resource issue, right? So if it's not something that's a mandate, then there's a give and take in resources. So you might have a Cadillac version of resources in one county and then not so much in another county. And that's just based on budgets and priorities. But if you had a mandate, then we would see a process that would play out equally around the state and provides a means and a process for individuals to exercise their voice.
And wrapping up, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, that there are grants available. There's a federal grant available to help counties process this, put it into a computer system, the Vine that we talked about, and that might make things easier budget-wise for the county. Does that sound like something that you would encourage?
Absolutely. And I think with any type of change, there's pushback, right? I mean, change sometimes is just difficult. But once a process has been set up, and there would be a long process of education and process and best practices, and we have numerous states to choose from in which to base the model on. Yeah. South Carolina being one of them, a very proven model over the last 20 years. And then once people get in the habit of going through this process, it's not going to skip a beat, and we're going to realize that the pushback was in vain.
Well, thank you so much for wrapping that into a nice tight bow for us, because you have the perspective that a lot of people don't, being a former prosecutor and former judge, and seeing for yourself what some of these families go through. So thank you so much
My
for
pleasure. Thank you for having
part
me.
of this. Well, after the break, a domestic violence survivor is going to share her personal story and why she wants to see Marsy's law pass here in Georgia. We'll be back.